Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's England Football Learning webinar. We are absolutely delighted that you could join us this evening. Tonight's topic is looking at how you might use futsal to develop 2 and 3 player core moves. Now, we're very lucky tonight to be joined by an expert panel with years of experience across a variety of different contexts and environments who will hopefully be able to share that expertise with you all this evening. The first theme will be around understanding what the key rules associated are with futsal. We're then going to discuss, as Ash and Sean have mentioned, some of the 2 and 3 player core moves and the importance of those within both futsal and within football. And then we'll look at some practices that you can use to bring those 2 to 3 player core moves to life with your players. So without further ado, we'll get diving into the first theme this evening, which is looking at the key rules associated with futsal. I'm going to leave this in the hands of the experts now. So Rambo, I'll hand over to you to go through this first theme.
Thanks, Conal. So yeah, we are going to have a little discussion now as a panel and try and showcase the rules of futsal, but also the impact then on player development and how that can help in that. So for anyone that's new to the rules of futsal, we've put the sort of key headlines on the slide there. Sean, Ash, we're going to discuss this a little bit in detail in terms of some real key takeaways for us and then the impacts on player development.
I think the first thing that I kind of always share with people is kind of the unique constraints. So there's obviously quite a lot of laws of the game or rules of the game, if you will. But I think just highlighting the 4 or 5 unique constraints. So the ball, first of all, the reduced bounce, 30% reduced bounce. The surface typically being flat and hard and a smooth surface. And we'll come on to how that impacts player development and the demands of the game. Obviously, the goals, you can see the goal size there. So it's the same as indoor hockey or handball goals. Of course, then there's some interesting laws of the game as well. But it's making sure that we understand that those are key constraints for the game and trying to apply those constraints. And the last one being lines. The game's played to lines, so different obviously to perhaps the more traditional 5 or 6-a-side game that some of us might have grown up playing a little bit, and just recognizing those constraints are really important to the game. What and how are these constraints influencing the development of young players? I'll just pick out a couple for me that are really important. So the size of the court. The size of the court. So at kind of sort of adult level, it can be 40 meters by 20. At youth level, typically sort of 30 meters by 15. That 5v5 nature, if we were to amplify that onto an 11-a-side pitch, adult 11-a-side pitch to begin with, that's 37 versus 37. Can you imagine that? Like the reduced space and time, 37 versus 37. So now let's bring that back down to from a futsal perspective, the ability to play in those tight spaces. And I always look at it from 3 angles. The importance of players being aware of what's around them. So we talk about perception, being able to see and understand space around you. What's your environment telling you? Then, of course, the speed at which you're going to need to make decisions. That ball is traveling fast on a smooth surface. It's a little bit heavier. It travels a little bit quicker. I'm going to have to make sure I'm making quick decisions. And of course, the action as a result of that decision. What am I doing? Am I passing? Am I traveling? Am I securing the ball? Am I pressing from a defensive point of view? Am I covering? Whatever it is, I think that's a really, really key one to recognize that it's not just a game from a technical perspective, but from a tactical intelligence perspective. You're having to work 37 times quicker potentially. But a really interesting one is probably number 6 in relation to the goalkeeper. So the goalkeeper can only receive the ball once in a phase of play. So, for example, it's a goal clearance. If the ball's been shot wide, I would distribute the ball with my hands. So I might roll the ball to Ash, my teammate. He can't play that back to me now. He can't play that back to me until the opponent has touched it. So why is that an interesting from a player development perspective? Ash is now being pressed by Rambo. Ash now has to deal with that situation as an individual or his other 3 teammates on the court. So in terms of them now trying to find solutions as an individual, the constraint of the law of the game is now forcing them to act. But the unique thing around the goalie is once they cross the halfway line, they can have it as much as they want. That one phase is only determined by their own half. So there is exciting opportunities here to develop players that have the ability to deal in those tight situations where they are alone, or indeed for the goalkeeper to be utilised as an additional outfield player as well.
If you look at some of the best players who are coming from countries that play a lot of futsal, go back to players such as Ronaldinho, who's quite unique, I think, with the toe poke against Chelsea all those years ago, and the sort of foot control. Now there's more. You'll see it now in football where there's more players who can receive in tighter gaps just by using that sole control. So yeah, even though the ball changes weight and difference just by those players being exposed to that, they're used to, as Sean's saying, like working in massively constrained areas. So then when it does become bigger, it's almost like they've got even more space than every other player.
And I guess the question we're trying to ask is that on the screen. So how can coaches design practices to allow the players to practice different types of that restart? And I think, Sean, we spoke as we were planning this about often in futsal, the action ends, so that impacts on that transitional nature of it, and it comes to a close in terms of the end action. But then that is, how do you create chaos with transition?
Yeah, one of ours, so just from an England futsal, so we have some core principles from not just from a player development perspective, but from a coaching perspective, how we deliver our methodology. So one of the big things in every session is that transition has to be there. Because of the speed of the game, 1 minute it's a corner at one end, it's a corner at the other end. 1 minute it's a 2v1, then it's a 3v2 going the other way. We have to recreate that, and that's not easy. Sometimes you have to manufacture it, but that is the most demanding part of the game. And it's making sure that, again, our practice is reflective of that. And that would be something I would be doing. Why not start your practices from a corner? Why not manage that corner situation that might lead into some kind of transition? Because that's what happens in the game. 1 minute I'm striking towards goal and I think I might have scored the top corner. The keeper saved it, distributed quickly, and I'm recovering 20, 30 meters. And that's what we want to make sure happens. So not necessarily designing practice in isolation, but trying to connect that with different moments within the game that the young players will experience.
Iniesta wasn't a bad player, and he said football and futsal have a lot in common. There are different tactics and moves, but the same essence of mastering the ball, combining and making quick decisions. And I think those have really come out in terms of mastering the ball, combining with your teammates, trying to outwit the opposition, and then making quick decisions to influence that. So that leads us on nicely to ways to do that, and core moves. This is now about the importance of those 2 and 3 player core moves. So we're going to go through a selection of them in terms of definitions, and then some applied examples of what they look like in action from a different age and stage of development. So we'll highlight as we go. Where we're going to start is what is a core move. We spoke about it being in a fundamental coordinated combination. Using 2 or 3 players helps eliminate defenders, so it links the principle of player penetration, but it also maintains possession. It can take anywhere on the pitch or court, and the aim is to entice the defenders, to hide and disguise your intentions, and then to think ahead of the defenders and ultimately outwit them while progressing up the court to penetrate. So these are the examples we're going to go through. So example 2 player core moves. So wall passes, diagonal pass, straight runs, overlaps, and then straight pass, diagonal run. The 3 players are up, back, and throughs, a lending pass, around the corner, and then a set back pass.
A big thing for me with futsal, which might be slightly different to football from a space perspective, is with your diagonal pass and straight run, and then straight pass and diagonal run. Because of the nature of the court size, we often talk about ball first, particularly over short distances. And what I mean by that is, as Rambo's spoken about, that relationship between 2 players is really important. Have we both identified the opportunity for that pass, my movement, for example? If I go first in futsal and the ball doesn't reach me and I'm out of the game defensively, a 3 versus 2 or a 4 versus 3 will happen very, very quickly. And because of that reduced numbers, where you have an overload like that, it will definitely end in a shot most likely, or potentially a goal. So one of the reasons over short distances we talk about ball first is if I don't get on the end of it because the execution is not quite right, I'm still ball side. I'm goal side. I can defend. I can even counter press and win the ball higher up the court, for example. And then the only bits I just wanted to add on the 3-player core moves, I think this starts to really speak to a little bit of group tactics or principles of the game with width and depth, but importantly, your role as an individual. So I look at the player on the ball, your job is to secure possession for the team. Player B, can you support around the ball? We often use the word connect. And player C, how do you go and perhaps stretch the game? So some people use the secure, support, and stretch. We tend to use the word threat. Can you offer threat by either switching the play or maybe attacking space in behind? So I think that 3-player move really starts to speak to those individual roles as a group.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, I think it's really important that coaches recognise that depending on the age and stage of your players, some of these things will be really difficult to do right now. So, for example, I think we can look at the wall pass or 1-2 or whatever terminology you use at your club as being something that, for me, the youngest of players can be taught over a period of time. And as I heard one of the questions in the box was, how do you introduce futsal to really young players, talking like 6-7 years old? Well, small number practices and really breaking the game down into this, in really putting a magnifying glass on a situation, and that's what we're talking about here. So that you understand what the benefit of this is. How is it going to unlock some space, or how is it going to help your players to beat an opponent in the game? I think it's really important that as coaches you decide what you are going to expose your players to, and also give them long enough to practice these moves over a period of time. But I just think these are exactly, some of the core principles of creating opportunities for players to combine and understand why they are combining. So as coaches, we definitely need to understand these. What these stats definitely do show is when core moves lead to goal scoring opportunities, it's generally more in football, because you're trying to unlock some space. So you'll see, for example, a lot of football teams, Arsenal, Man City, a lot of teams now in the Premier League, where midfielders will run from like a central position to the byline, to the crossing line. Sometimes that can be a sliding pass from a winger, and that would be classed as a straight run and diagonal pass, or vice versa if it's the other way around, and maybe they're running from the wing straight in behind on an angled run, and it's a straight pass that gets them in. Sean spoke about this before, but with the lack of space you've got in behind your opponent in futsal, obviously that then means that the core moves are generally happening deeper on the court, and that's to obviously unlock and try and create even more space and time to get in behind your opponent, because you simply don't have as much of it the higher up the court you go.
I think what we're trying to show here is probably linking it back to those 6 capabilities and making sure we kind of recognize, understand the importance of them. I might just pick one out, and I'm going to start with scanning, because that's the key thing with young players in futsal. The constraint around them is that importance of what is going on around me. Am I understanding my own position? Am I understanding how that relates to my defender? What's my teammate on the ball? What's the space and pressure around them? Do I need to go and play that role of supporter to connect with them? Do we have the opportunity where he's got more space and time, and I can start to threat a little bit further beyond the pitch? And I think that's what I think futsal can really help with. The ability to play through 360 degrees. That's that's key. You know, we've seen it through the free core move pass, where we might play forwards and it come back out. When you're receiving in the middle of the court and you've got defenders around you, having that ability to understand where's the solution, where's the way out. And I think that's where, in any part of the court, setting up 2-player or 3-player core moves, it's really important. Not just I spot that opportunity, but as a pair or as a trio, we collectively spot that opportunity. And I think it's the frequency of which it happens in a game of futsal and the deliberate actions that young players will start to pick up on is why it starts to look a little bit different to perhaps just 5-a-side or 7-a-side. I think it's the recognition of those constraints which gives those players opportunities more frequently.
You know, all of these capabilities are almost senses. You know, it's the ability to sense where the opponent's coming from. We speak about scanning a lot, and quite often we reference where the person is looking or trying to play next. But within futsal, if you don't scan for the opponent and pick up on their body shape, that's really going to let you down. So you're going to not know which foot to take it with, or which sort of space you're trying to go into next, how to dribble with the ball, how to drag the ball, how to shift the ball. So yeah, when we get into the examples that we're going to show, I think this is another opportunity for everyone to really pause and pick up on what they're seeing, what were the key capabilities that were used from each of the players that we're going to observe next.
The other bit's just linking it back to some of the questions earlier about sort of practice. If I just pause it there's a practice. We've got our deep kicking. Someone mentioned about what's the best way of perhaps developing 2-player core moves. I play lots of 2v1s and even 3v1s. So, for example, this red player coming forwards into this zone, we could create a zone and talk about, okay, 2 versus 1, we're going to start from the sideline ball. So we're going to reenact some of that development for the players. Player comes in, 2v1. How do you get past them? Simple as that. Find solutions and ways. And here, obviously, they've played a couple of wall passes or 1-2s back to each other in order to do that. It might be another time we change the constraint. We might put 2 defenders in there. How do we now get beyond them? How do we find new ways and new solutions? So it's obviously a nice example of the kind of wall pass, but it's also this. You can see here clearly there's an opportunity from a practice design perspective. That's a situation they'll face probably time and time again to some degree. Can we look at ways in which we can replicate that within training?
So just because it was a natural point, I think we're going to go on to the practices to bring this to life. So we'll show some footage of different types of practice, but then with a reference back to, okay, how does it allow your players an opportunity to practice the 2- and 3-player core moves?
Yeah, so this is an example of our women's group from a year or so ago. So we have a 3v3 in the middle, and then we have two what we call pivots. And then once the ball's played in to one of the pivots, one of the forwards, the other forward sort of comes out of the game, and then the player who played it in can go and join in. So we've got diagonal pass, they go and join in. Obviously, decisions from a defensive point of view. But this is about recreating some of those 3-player situations, looking at that security, looking at who's supporting, and then, of course, the support runs off it. So there's an example where we might play around the corner, orange 10, receiving the ball, and able to play around. And what we're doing here from a defensive point of view is we're increasing the success by managing the defense. So there's only one defender in that final zone, but once the ball goes forward, the other pivot or forward player, number 4, had to step out, and that creates that 2v1. So yeah, this is, for me, a really great practice. And You saw me there. I was actually rolling in the ball. Other parts of the practice, we might do it as a restart from a mid-court kick-in, for example.
Thanks for that, Sean. Those of you that are eagle-eyed, you may notice a difference when we talk about realism of the game in numbers here, Sean. So I don't know if you want to explain that, the reason to go for 2 pivots, and just to explain some of the language being the furthest forward players.
Yeah, I think it's like, well, futsal's a 5v5 game, but we do a lot of 1v1, 2v1, 2v0, 3v3. We'll also go beyond 5 players if we want to, really look at our practice design and how we create specific situations. So one of our challenges from a national team is how do we get the ball forward into that final third? So how do our 3 in that mid-court section become more successful at that? And we have to go on that journey. I think we said about a long-term journey. So in terms of them understanding 3-player moves and be able to connect that to forward play, we need to make sure they can see things. So the 2 attackers in that final third is to give them more opportunities, more repetition, more success. And then we start to, as this slide says, we start to take away some of those constraints. So now if you look at this end, we have our 4v4. We've still got our zone to play into. But what I've done here is I've taken away one of the attackers, but I've created a safe zone. And I've managed the defensive pressure by saying you can only defend behind. In futsal, there's no offside, so sometimes the attackers go beyond, sometimes the defenders are in front. But I'm just layering the challenge over a period of time so they can start to continue to see those opportunities to play forward. And it might be that we then open it up. It might be that defensive recovery runs can take place. It might be that the one of the 3, as it says there, can go and attack the space in behind with a straight run and a diagonal pass. It's just looking at what is your session intention, what are you trying to get out of it, and how can we support players with a practice that affords them those opportunities.
So yeah, I guess just to summarize some of our discussions in terms of different practice design considerations, we've touched on where you start on the court, what that looks like in terms of start and restart points. How do you challenge the players? So what's the task? What's the level of difficulty? And then how do you make it look like the game? I think they would be the take homes for me.
It's particularly if you've got a large group of players, it's hard to coach everyone equally, and it's not going to happen. But through a course of 6 weeks, you might decide, okay, this week I'm going to prioritize these individuals for these reasons, but I'm going to manage the defense for these reasons. And you know what? Okay, from time to time, we might leave players alone and just say to them, tonight, I just really want you to go and explore, go and have fun with it, go and enjoy it, come back and share what you found out a little bit. So that's another thing that I use. Like when I design practices, I do think about, okay, who am I coaching tonight? Who am I managing? And who might I just check in with, or perhaps have as much contact with? That's an important one for me. And then the only other one I was just going to mention was session intentions. I think this comes back to that model around our coach behaviours. This is one by a chap called Danny Newcombe, who's Wales hockey coach and works for the Premier League as well. He talks about exploration, exploit, and execute. And what he's referring to there is the mindset of the practice to help players get into that space. Tonight, I want you to explore. Well, if I ask my young players to explore, they will have an idea of what that means. Go and be adventurous. Go and be creative with it. So then my behaviors need to replicate that. Tonight, we're going to go and execute this action. Well, it's got different parameters around it. I might come and stop things a little bit more because I really want us to perform this well. So it's just recognizing your intentions and then a little bit of you as a coach and your roles and responsibilities to align with that.
For me, it would definitely be, what we've tried to do tonight is give you examples of something that can be happening on a really small minutiae level. So 2 players playing together, it's then realizing where is that likely to happen on the court or pitch. How do you then land that into, as Sean's put there, how do you land that into which session you're going to choose to do it with at which time, and also recognize that the players, it might take time for this stuff to land and take forwards. But if you're thinking about all of these things within your practice design, practice considerations, and more importantly, what do those young children or adults who you're working with, what do they want from the session? So yeah, hopefully we've been able to touch on quite a lot there in terms of what people can take forwards into their practice at their clubs with their players.
We'll leave it there. thanks for everything this evening, and we'll see you again soon.